Okay, so I have the honor of introducing our next speaker, Representative Ken Helm. And Ken is a state representative in Oregon House of Representatives for District 27. He is the chair of the House Committee on Climate, Energy, and the Environment. He also serves on the House Committee on Housing and Homelessness, both critical issues facing our state. He was appointed a member of the Oregon Global Warming Commission, and he is the co-chair of the Legislative Wildlife Caucus. Ken has a BA in History and Political Science from Willamette University, and he also has a JD from Willamette University College of Law. So let's welcome Representative Ken Helm today.
Good morning. I was lucky to step in and catch most of Chair George's presentation. It was really fabulous and inspiring, so thank you. And also, I don't want to let it pass to thank Senator Merkley as well. We in Oregon have a fabulous federal delegation, but among those great people, Senator Merkley has really taken interest in all issues water. And he has done what he is supposed to do as one of our congressional representatives, and that is bring money home. And we have a lot to be thankful for there. And we hope that more will come, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I represented a district in Oregon since 2015. And upon arriving at the Capitol, I was immediately put to use on the committees that relate to my career background. So that was the Energy and Environment Committee and the Ag and Land Use Committee. After a while, they asked me to chair those committees. So I chaired the Energy and Environment Committee for 3 sessions, then chaired a Water Committee, which we recreated actually after a long hiatus. I chaired that for 2-3 years, and now we've decided that we need to overload my committee with yet another topic. So the standing committee that I chair right now is the Agriculture, Land Use, Water, and Natural Resources Committee. And believe me, that is a lot to get done in one session when you see all the bills file in. What I wanted to talk to you, I'll get back to that in a minute. And let me make sure that I know how much time I'm supposed to have.
Until 10:20.
10:20. I'm going to put my timer on. I know that's not very like a politician, but I'm going to do it. See if we can stick to it. I'm going to come back to what the legislature is doing in a little while. But before that, I wanted to let you know what I'm reading right now. I've been preparing for the legislature since Christmas. And so, of course, to do so, I decided that I needed to study disasters. And I'm reading Neil Ferguson's book, I just finished it, in fact, called Doom. And it's the history of both natural and human-caused disasters and the interaction between the two, which happens every time, we are told. He explains that there are basically 3 types of disasters in the science of studying disasters. Ones that are called gray rhinos. Gray rhinos are the problems that we know exist. They sit right in front of us all the time. We know that they're going to happen, and when they do, we always act surprised that they happen again and we're unprepared. And then we don't do a very good job on the tail of those disasters through our networks of human connections and systems in responding. Then there are disasters called black swans. They're fairly unpredictable. We're not prepared for them because they're fairly remote. And then when they do come, they do genuinely catch us by surprise, and we're left trying to figure out how to respond the next time. But they are hard to predict. And then there are the Dragon Kings, which is where we have one of the former two, and then we as humans, by misappraising the threat and not preparing properly, cause the disaster to multiply exponentially. And it's arguable that we've just lived through a Dragon King in the pandemic. Water, however, is of the first variety. It sits in front of us all the time. It's perennial. It's perennial as the rain. And yet, when it comes to water, over and over again, the world does not prepare correctly. We act surprised when the disaster comes, and then we don't do enough to prepare for the future. And it's in that context that I think we have to look at our governmental structures, because we do have the chance over and over again to prepare better. And we're in one of those moments here in Oregon politically. We have a new governor. We have a new Speaker of the House. We have a new Senate President. We have, and I hate this word now, and you probably do too, unprecedented. Reading this book made me think, oh my gosh, everything's been precedented. It all happened before, and we just didn't learn from it. But maybe we can use the word unprecedented when it comes to the amount of federal funds that are available to do the good work that you do and that we should be planning for. And one of our challenges is how to get our arms around that opportunity, draw it down to Oregon. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The reason I brought this PowerPoint, and I'm going to try to move through it quickly, isn't to teach you much. I don't think you can learn much more from me. But what I wanted you to see is what my colleague, Representative Mark Owens, Republican from Harney County, and I sat down with the gubernatorial candidates in the late summer and tried to indoctrinate candidate Tina Kotek and candidate Christine Drayton with what we thought our dilemma is with water, and try to convince them to elevate water in their agenda, whoever of them were to get elected. And now we have Governor Tina Kotek. She was sworn in earlier this week with the rest of us. And I'm proud to say that I think she took it in. So I wanted you to see what we told her. And most of this will seem like Water 101 to you. And I'll move through it quickly. Right? Water in Oregon is a public resource. We know the history of how we've regulated it, including the Clean Water Act coming in the 70s, and how we've implemented it. Our water challenges. Our water challenges have been the same for a long time. That is, we have a lot of water when we don't need it, and not very much when we do. This is a map showing late season availability of surface water. And only the purple have some water left, and it's not enough. Groundwater resources. Here's what we think we know on this map. It probably doesn't mean much to you. It still confuses me, and that's why I always hand this part over to my colleague, Rep. Owens, who is an alfalfa farmer in Harney County and very concerned with water. That's where all of his irrigation water comes from. The important thing here is that we don't know enough. And even when we think we know about groundwater, second looks tell us that we might have been wrong. We might have misappraised. And so we're always continually staring into the abyss with groundwater and wishing we knew more. And this is a map that you probably know well, DEQ website, and what Chair George was just talking about to some degree, the 303D list. These are the streams that are water quality impaired, and you know there's a lot of them. Drought. This is one of the hardest issues to talk about. What we told the gubernatorial candidates was this: we're no longer in drought. We're in a long-term water scarcity event. Drought is the new normal. We have to assume that based on what we know, drought will continue at its current intensity or worse for the next 2 decades. So let's not get into the cycle of hoping that next year will be better, because it doesn't matter whether it's next year is a little better or the next year is a little better. But soon we will have another heat bill, and it will hurt people. We have an agency that has correctly been identified as being underfunded. Water Resources. Chair George talked about DEQ, same thing. It's been decades in the making. We started to unravel that problem and address it in 2021 when we had additional federal dollars. There's much more to do. I may have. Part of that problem is we still don't have the data that we need to understand actually when our basins are over-allocated for surface water and whether our aquifers are adequate. And yet, we continue to issue permits into the dark, into the abyss. And then when the real tight times come, as you remember a couple of years ago, people's wells dried. In the Klamath, a lot of people's wells dried up. Hundreds. And they will again. And we're just now starting to get money rolled out efficiently to address this long-term problem. And guess what? When you want to deepen your well and there's 400 other people in line in front of you and there's only 5 well drillers around, it's going to take a long time. So that's part of the problem too. And we have, and this perennial water scarcity, it hits every sector, and Chair George mentioned that. Fish and wildlife, people, agriculture, exacerbated by climate disruption. What the heck is happening in California right now, right? We just got done with it burning up, and now they've got more water than they can use, and they can't get it where they need it. Small cities, small water utilities, they are indeed sitting on infrastructure that is headed toward end of life. And in many, many instances, rate structures have not been able to keep up with needs, and they find themselves behind and unable to catch up without state and federal help. And not to be left out, and this is very near and dear to my heart, I'm a trout and steelhead fisherman, very concerned about the plight of our salmon, steelhead, and trout in the state, and in fact all of our indigenous species. But we have a whole economic sector that depends on taking folks out and enjoying it. There's no whitewater rafting if there's not enough water. And I remember thinking that when I visited the Rio Grande, Upper Rio Grande near Taos about 20 years, I looked down at this pathetic little trickle and I thought, you're going to take people whitewater rafting on that? What a joke. We don't want that to happen to the Deschutes or the Rogue or the Grand Ronde or any of our other favorite streams that we have, that we fish on and recreate on. Good news, most Oregonians are concerned about water. But the bad news is they don't know exactly where to put their emphasis. They're depending on us. And we're not good enough at tapping into their local concerns or their local knowledge. Again, we have federal money coming even more than when we gave this presentation. The trick is, how do we get a hold of it? I'll go back. The Oregon Water Futures Report, which is a byproduct of the Willamette Initiative, and some really great work by community groups here, told us a number of things a couple of years ago. One of the important things was Oregon does okay at pulling down federal money for water issues. We could do a lot better, and one of their key recommendations was to put some emphasis in this area and create a hub that added capacity to agencies that are already trying to go after those federal channels of water funding and new grant opportunities. Did I run out? Yeah. I'm going to pass over that one. So we asked this very question and asked our gubernatorial candidates to think about it. Along the way, and this is something that will take more time, so I'm going to cover it quickly. We wanted to give each of the candidates an idea of two different scenarios in the state and two different ways that folks have tried to tackle problems, and to point out both the shortcomings and the ways that planning can be done better, and some side issues that give us some insight. Mark usually handles the Harney Basin because that's where he's from, so I'll give you the long and the short of it. About 7 years ago, Water Resources Department had to come into the Harney Basin and say, hey, we're gonna stop issuing permits. You don't have enough water. And the folks there said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Our livelihood is attached to alfalfa growing. We don't have any other economy, basically. And you're telling us that we don't have water to grow that crop. And they didn't believe Water Resources. After a while, Water Resources produced some preliminary data, and oh my gosh, our checkbook is overdrawn. They were taking out more water from their aquifer, which, by the way, is a closed aquifer. There's only a couple of minor inputs from surface water. All the rest is precipitation and prehistoric water. So their recharge potential there is not great. So they're overdrawing their budget. What do? Well, at first there was a lot of resistance, as you can imagine. We don't believe the data, we don't want to believe the data, and we want to just get back to farming. But some of the folks there knew they couldn't do that, so they took advantage of one of the state programs called place-based planning and started a collaborative process with the community to build trust, try to understand their water problems, and how they might forge a way forward. That's where I got to know Mark. I went out to Harney before he was even in the legislature and started watching what they were doing. And from those early days to now has been quite a good evolution. The big takeaway for me, and I don't want to speak for any of the folks out there because I'm not them, but being a sympathetic observer, what I saw the community do go from denial to acceptance to action. And all that has been pretty stepwise, cautious. But the critical change in direction that came there was that the USGS completed a comprehensive groundwater study that confirmed the state's preliminary data. And so there's no more arguing. No more doing what I call negotiating with ghosts. When we lack data, for water in particular, we start negotiating both against imagined ills and demons and ourselves. Because with the lack of data, folks retreat to their policy positions or their personal biases, their anecdotal experience, and become entrenched. When you have the data, everybody's got to face up to it, and there are some aha moments, and those are good. They're hard, but they're good, and that's what happened in the Harney. And we're trying to assist them as they move into the future and help solve that problem. Different scenario in the Deschutes. Long-term basin attention. Long-term basin contention. And long-term solutions that have come to some fruition in the last few years because of super hard work by those communities, the advocates in them, and state and federal partnerships with all the local folks. Culminating most recently in a habitat conservation plan that sets the game plan for the future. And once again, provides clarity for the problems that they want to solve. Again, super hard. This season, the HCP required an amount of water to be discharged from Wikiup Reservoir that didn't leave as much water for the irrigation districts this season or last season that they had been used to. And it was hard. North Unit got a mere fraction, which is up in Madras, Redmond, Culver, a mere fraction of the water that they had received before. But they'd all agreed on the HCP and they valued it and they have vowed to protect it, thank goodness. Without it, they go back to their camps and start feuding again. So different outcome there, and they still have one way to go too. What we pointed out to Governor Kotek is we did a good job a few years ago asking the department to come up with a strategic framework plan, and they did it. It is an impressive document. It really, really is. And it's due to be updated this year, and we're going to put resources to doing that. And yet, again, because of budget constraints and other distractions, this strategy cannot be said to be very well implemented. With all the hard work and the good ideas, it's not exactly a dusty plan on a shelf, but it's mostly used for budget decisions in back rooms that nobody sees. We really need to bring it forward, identify what we said we wanted to do, and start doing it, and pay for it. So these are some of the things that go along with that. Again, hitting home the point that water's been neglected, both water quality and quantity. You need to elevate it in your agenda, Madam Governor. And despite the ability to put some historic numbers, that $530 million number there is great. We should all appreciate it. About 2/3 of that went directly out to local governments, though, where they may or may not have a plan, they may or may not have the ability to execute a plan, they may not have enough money actually to do the work that they want to do, and so the money that we gave them is not enough. So they may find themselves in about the same place as when they received the money a couple years ago. So priority areas, and I've got 2 minutes left, I see. So I'll try, and we're close to the end. I'm going to start at the bottom. Effective investments. Representative Owens and I have worked, this will be the 3rd time that we've suggested that the legislature approve a federal funding hub, put it somewhere close to the governor, staff it, get an advisory committee together to advise on both what money to go for, how to go for it, and put some expertise into an office that will stretch across agencies, help coordinate efforts, and add capacity to pull down federal money. Not just federal money to be used by the state, but pulling down federal money to go right through the state coffers and into local governments too. Communities, organizations, everywhere that we can think of to put the money to both conserve water and do more good with it. So there will likely be a bill. There is some talk about a potential executive order. I frankly don't know where the governor is on that thinking right now. She's got other executive orders that she's prioritized, and you've probably read about those in the paper over the last few days around homelessness and housing supply. We are also asking our colleagues to consider telling our Water Resources Department that we need to be responsible accountants of our water. Start managing it instead of just regulating it. And that may mean taking a break from issuing permits until we figure out what is the status of our basins. Are they over-allocated? Do we not know? What's our groundwater resource? Do we know that? And until we can figure it out, we should not be issuing new permits. It's very common sense. You do it in your own bank account every month. You don't want to overdraw. This will be very hard to do because we have a system that's served us well over the last century, which is putting water to beneficial use for economic purposes primarily. And we're addicted to it. And slowing it down is hard. I'm going into bonus minutes, I think, but still headed for 10:20. Slowing it down is hard, and you can see by the very poor example of California, where Lake Mead and Lake Powell have been decreasing in water capacity for years and years and years. And then over the past 2 years, it's extreme, right? We're getting down to the point where they can't run their hydroelectric facilities out of them. They have no supply. Why is that? The analogy that works for me is it's like driving on an icy road. And Oregonians know a lot about that. We know that when there's ice on the road, snow on the road, and you're approaching an intersection with a stop sign, if you wait to put on the brakes until you're almost there, you're going to slide right through it. And you're either going to hit somebody else or arrive in some location on the other side that you don't want to be on. That is what happened in California, because they basically cannot stop using water because they haven't planned to do so. Prudent drivers see the intersection ahead and go, oh, maybe I should tap the brakes a couple times. Maybe I should downshift. Maybe I want to be able to stop before I slide through the intersection. That's what we have to do in Oregon. And this is the final statement. I'll leave it up here for a little bit for you to read, that we told the governor. This is a pretty significant departure from business as usual. So that's where we are. The governor will turn her attention soon to our natural resource agencies. We have Water Resources needs a new director. DEQ will be looking for a new leader. We have other agencies as well that will need new directors. It's a chance for the governor to check in on the culture of our agencies and whether the mission may have changed over time and set new directions and courses. So that's, I think, where I will end. I had planned to have time for questions, and if Holly thinks we have time, I'm happy to take a couple.
So I have a question for you. How can we follow the work of your committee? What is the best way of getting information? Is there a website, or can we get on an email list?
Yes, really the best way is to, now that we'll be in session next week, is to follow us on the Oregon Legislative Information System. If you need help understanding that, call my fabulous Chief of Staff, Greg Mintz. Email us at my legislative address. Email Rep. Owens at his legislative address. And his dedicated water persons, many of you know, Harmony Burright. And we'll help you follow the work of the committee. And there is not a dedicated website to our work because it's not laid out in front of us yet. One of the things that's still to come is a drought package, a water scarcity package that identifies how we move forward and get some of this federal money to tackle the problems that we've all been talking about. And I don't know how we're exactly going to keep track of that. But for the time being, use those old tools. They work well.
Oh, and I have a follow-up question before we break. Do you have an idea of the priorities of your committee? Do you know what bills you're going to be working through? At this point, do you have an idea?
We will have a water-heavy agenda because Representative Owens and I have worked the entire interim on interfacing with folks. Not to the extent that that work is done by any means. There's always more to do and more community groups to attend to. More interface with our tribal nations as well is needed. So we've worked hard and we've got a lot of bills. The bills dropped on Monday. They're being sorted. And in fact, this very afternoon, I'm getting with our committee analysts to understand what's coming at us. It's going, to the extent that you follow this, folks, we're, with the addition of this new additional topical area of natural resources, which includes fisheries and forests and critters, which gobble up time from a political point of view, we're not going to have time to hear all the bills that are going to come. It's just, we're not. And we're going to have to ask people to be as efficient as ever with their testimony and their information. I'm going to demand that my committee members do more than they've ever done before in preparing for committee so that we don't spend a lot of time asking questions that don't need to be asked because somewhere they're in the testimony. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge.
I think we're going to have to break now, but I'm encouraging everybody who wants to continue to talk to Representative Helm to tackle him at the break. Let's come back in 15 minutes and we'll pick up with an excellent panel discussion.